This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. It's a little bit of a different video today, following on really I suppose from a video I did a couple of weeks ago about a fantastic rock compilation album that played a big part in my musical education. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link to it in the description. It's about, as I say, a rock compilation album that came out in the early 80s called Formula 30. And just the sleeve notes on that album, as well as the music that was contained on like double gatefold vinyl album. The sleeve notes were a big part of my musical education, but they weren't responsible for all of it. So that's what I thought I'd cover today, because I've had a few people asking, you know, how did you get into the music that you're into, essentially. So hopefully today I'll be able to just kind of give you a bit of a rundown on that, and a little bit of a trip down memory lane for me as well. As I was growing up in the 1970s, you know, there wasn't a lot of rock music around, contrary to what you perceive of the 70s as being the era of classic rock, and it was. But certainly in Britain, we had one main music show on TV. It was called Top of the Pops. I'm sure many people are well aware of it. And it, just for the casual musical observer, that was music on TV. We didn't have MTV, we didn't have anything like that. You had this 1.5 hour show once a week that was full of just whatever happened to be climbing up the top 40 that week, and that was it. And you know, frankly, how often did Led Zeppelin appear on a show like that? You know, or you know, bands of that classic rock 70s ilk. You know, they just weren't getting exposure on TV. Of course, we had another kind of late night show called The Old Grey Whistle Test. That I sometimes used to stay awake for, but that was, you know, that wasn't a regular thing for me until later, really, until I started becoming more of an adolescent than a young wee whippersnapper. So yeah, I'd heard of ABBA, I'd heard of ELO, I'd heard of, you know, Shawaddy Waddy and all of the other regular fixtures on, you know, the mainstream TV, one show a week, Top of the Pops. But, you know, I was blissfully unaware of bands like Bad Company and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and, you know, all of the kind of classic rock bands of that 70s period. I just didn't really, you know, I wasn't exposed to them until I went to college in 1984. I was 17 years old, and let me show you where it was I went to college. You can see this is Middlesbrough over here. That's where I was born, and I currently live in this little town here called Redcar. But I went to college over this side of the country in, as you can see, the Lake District National Park. And if we just scroll up here, you can see there's this National Trust Ray Castle. It's an old Gothic style Victorian castle, and if we just zoom in, I'll show you a little bit of it. There it is. Let's drag the little man into the car park and see if we can see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that was my old college. It was, at the time, a training college training up Merchant Navy radio officers, and I was there for about 3 years. And if I remember rightly, if you just kind of follow the path round here, there we go. Let's just have a look over here. I think that this was the room where I got my musical education. Because it was a Merchant Navy college, all the rooms were referred to as decks, and that was a deck there. And as you would, we referred to ourselves as the A team. And yeah, so that was the room where I got my musical education. And as I said, that Formula 30 album played a big part in, you know, kind of informing me in, you know, who was who in the canon of classic rock. But the thing is, that room I just showed you there was about, I think, 8 or 10 of us living in that room, 4 or 5 sets of double bunks. And, you know, whoever had the best boombox stereo kind of cassette radio twin speaker kind of thing usually was that became the communal boombox for the room. So you get exposed to other people's music. And it was as much of an education in music as it was in, you know, becoming a Merchant Navy radio officer, my time at that college, because I heard bands that not only I'd not heard before, but I'd not heard of before. I'd never heard of Boston. I'd never heard of Journey. I'd never heard of Asia. I kind of knew there was a band with a weird name like Yes, and I was exposed to them for the first time, and you know, really, like I knew Pink Floyd because here's an interesting little bit of pub trivia for you. The last Christmas number 1 of the 1970s in the UK was Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. You know, that became the big Christmas hit of 1979. So I knew Pink Floyd, but I didn't know anything other than that one song. When I was 17 years old. And in that room that I showed you, I heard Dark Side of the Moon for the first time. As I said, I heard the first Asia album for the first time. I heard Emerson, Lake and Palmer for the first time. I heard Boston for the first time. You know, beyond the obvious hits like Sultans of Swing and other hit singles that it had, you know, Romeo and Juliet and, you know, stuff like that. And that Twisting by the Pool EP that they came out with, I'd never really heard much Dire Straits. I heard the Alchemy live album for the first time in that room there, and I was lapping it all up. The Eagles, that room was where I heard Hotel California for the first time, and just, you know, vociferously and eagerly and hungrily, you know, reading the sleeve notes on these albums and saying, oh, that guy there, is he the same? Is that, like, for instance, reading the sleeve notes of the Asia album and seeing C. Palmer? Is that Palmer guy anything to do with the Palmer in Emerson, Lake and Palmer? I wonder if he is, you know, and kind of, you know, realising who Carl Palmer was and what bands he played with, and just generally, as I say, getting something of a musical education. And part of what I do now as a guitar teacher, I get you know, people of all ages having guitar lessons off me, literally from, well, I would say 8 to 80, but I tend usually to start teaching at age 10. So I'll get 10-year-olds to 80-year-olds coming to me for lessons, and it's always a joy when you get some 13, 14, 15-year-old having lessons off me, and they've heard a snippet of, they've heard, you know, some kind of whiff of something, some classic rock band that was hitherto unknown to them, and they come to me and say, have you ever heard of, like, Supertramp was the one that got mentioned recently in a lesson with a young 15-year-old lad. Have you ever heard of this band called Supertramp? Funnily enough, yes, I have. So, you know, once upon a time, you would have, you know, possibly, you know, loaned them an album or something, or put an album onto cassette if you were into breaking copyright regulations, which, of course, I would never do that. I never have done. But now you can sort of just send them a few Spotify links and hopefully try and pay it forward a little bit and pass on the joy of this wonderful music. I honestly believe that good music is timeless. You know, it's the reason why, you know, people still listen to Mozart and Beethoven. And for me, that kind of that music that stood the test of time over centuries is all the more powerful because if you think of what have we got in common with people who were alive in Mozart's time, there's not a lot in terms of the world we live in that we have in common with them. But if the music can span that can span those differences, those eons of time, then it's got to be pretty powerful music. And hopefully, you know, I'm passing on, you know, some recommendations and, you know, great music that will hopefully last for centuries in the same way. You know, and it's weird because, like, recently, oh gosh, back in the springtime, I went to see the Classic Rock Show for the second time, and the audience demographic at that gig was quite enlightening, because there were people there of like my age and significantly older, but there were also, you know, adolescents, teenagers there who were hearing this music for the first time. Possibly not for the first time, but certainly seeing it performed live, possibly for the first time. You know, and you're talking about The Who, and you know, who else did the Classic Rock Show? Deep Purple, and you know, all kind of their set list. But yeah, so if I can kind of play just a small part in, you know, passing on this wonderful music to another generation, in the same way as it was passed on to me, quite by accident, by people who, as I said, I was 17 when I went to that college there, and I was, you know, I was sharing accommodation with old men of like 24 and 25 years old. Dear me, ancient. And, you know, picking up on their musical taste. So, you know, if I can pass that on in the same way as it was passed on to me, then, you know, I think I'm doing a little bit of good. What do you think? So anyway, that is a brief little trip down memory lane for me, recounting how I ended up listening to and enjoying the music that I listen to and enjoy. I'm sure each and every one of you watching this have got a similar story. So please feel free to leave it in the comments, and be interested to know how you got into the music that you got into and why, and what was your musical education like? Were there any big moments like I had, as I say, kind of sharing accommodation and listening to other people's music like that? It certainly shaped me musically. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to wrap the video up there, folks. Hope you've enjoyed my little rambly trip down memory lane, reminiscing about the music that I discovered and when I discovered it. And if that's the case, if you've enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell in case you haven't already done so, and why not drop me a like while you're at it. And don't forget the live stream every Friday, 5 p.m. UK time, where we drink beer and talk about music and guitars and all manner of other stuff, probably even reminiscing about musical memories like I've been doing today. But that is very much the video for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.